and thank you for having me. I'm so pleased to be here with you. I feel kind of out of place because I have no background in social work at all, so I'm learning so much from all of you, but I think that some of the work that we do in the Stennis Center is really relevant to a lot of what has been discussed today. The status of the world that we live in, and so many of the issues, social justice issues in particular, that affect many of your clients and many people across the country. So today I'm here to talk about women in politics, which is something that I love to talk about, but it's also something that's been in the news quite a bit lately, so hopefully it's something of interest to you. I see a lot of women in the crowd, but of course this issue and this topic is really relevant to everyone, all of us. So first, if I can get my presentation going, I want to tell you a little bit about the Stennis Center. The Stennis Center for Public Service is a federal legislative branch agency. So we were created by Congress in the 80s as sort of a living memorial, if you will, to the late Senator John C. Stennis. A lot can be said about Senator Stennis's politics, choices that he made while in the Senate, votes that he made, but I think one thing that probably everybody can agree on and what the center was formed for was in sort of honor of his public service career. He served for over 40 years of continuous service in Congress, coupled with some time in the state legislature. So he really dedicated his life to public service and government. And so that's why the center was created, to honor that and to create an agency such as ours with the mission of promoting that. So that is exactly what we do. We promote public service and public service leadership across the country. Our mandate is a little bit broad, but there are several specific parts that kind of dictate what we do. And I'm going to go through some of those briefly with you, but just in quick, one of them is with congressional staff. So we have an office on Capitol Hill in DC, and then we have an office in Starkville, Mississippi. And so our congressional programs are specifically related to senior congressional staff. So chiefs of staff, committee staff directors, for members of Congress. So essentially the people that are writing the policy, basically running the government. I think the staff primarily is responsible for that. And then of course, in support of their member of Congress. So we do quite a bit of work with that staff. We also do a large bit of work with students. So college students, but also high school students across the country. We do a lot of work in speech and debate. I don't know if any of you have a past in speech and debate, but we do a lot of work with the National Speech and Debate Association, Truman Scholars, and we have a great program that I've actually been talking with a professor of political science here at Southern Miss about bringing it here, called Congress to Campus, where we bring two former members of Congress, a Republican and a Democrat, to a college campus to just meet with students, not really in a lecture style, but to really sit down and talk about how Congress works, how government is really supposed to be, and compare that to how it is today, and then really talk about their path to public service. One thing I didn't mention that is really important is that the Stennis Center is bipartisan. And so it's very, very important at meetings and events such as this that we talk about policy. That's a big part of changing the world that we live in and making good choices. But the Stennis Center is really committed to creating programs and spaces for dialogue, relationship building that is free of discussion of policy, so that we can bring together Republicans and Democrats, which in today's world seems really difficult to do, to get members of both parties to come together in a room, get to know each other, talk to one another, and we find that the way that happens is without discussing policy. So, well, I've really enjoyed hearing all of the discussion today about policy, and I love that. But the Stennis Center is bipartisan, and we keep policy out of our programs, which makes us really unique. And so you can see this kind of statement sort of summarizes that the Stennis Center believes that no government, regardless of its history and structure, can be better than the people who make it work. And so obviously the goal is to find the best people that we can to run our government. And of course, that's an objective choice, but that's what we do, is we really try to train leaders to run for office, to be better politicians, to be better public servants, and to be able to work with one another in a better way. Because regardless of what our political persuasions are, I think we all know that there's always going to be multiple parties within our government, and so the ability to work together, for those parties to work together, is so critical, and I think it's something that is so lacking in today's world. So just to briefly go through some of our programs before we get into the meat of the program, congressional leadership, that is the work that we do with the senior staff in Washington, D.C. We have a fellowship program that's been really successful, and again, really the beauty of that program and kind of the whole crux of it is bringing together those high-level staff, Republicans and Democrats, into an off-the-record scenario. So we have dialogue sessions, retreats where nothing is on the record, no press, no media. They're literally just allowed to talk about what they think, and it's amazing, truly, the relationships that are built and how that has contributed to better policy for the country. For example, some of our previous fellows include the policy director for Nancy Pelosi and the chief of staff for Ted Cruz. So when you get those two people in a room together, obviously they agree about pretty much nothing as it relates to policy. But those two parties have to get together and approve a budget for our country. We saw what happens when they don't, our government shuts down. And so those relationships have been critical when the budget crisis was happening. One of those individuals was able to call somebody in the other party across the aisle and say, okay, what do we need to do to get this budget passed? So these types of relationships, these types of programs we think are so effective. We do a leadership program for interns, emerging leaders, those young Hill staffers, and then Congress to Campus, like I mentioned. We also have a partnership with the United States Navy, and we do quite a bit of work trying to bridge the gap between civilians and the military. So I think, especially in high-level government, many times the people that are making policy and making decisions for the military don't really know what it's like to be in the military. What their challenges are, what they're facing. And so when we bring those high-level or members of Congress with commanding officers of aircraft carriers together for a couple of days for them to talk and get to know each other, really starts to break down those barriers and better policy and better decisions are made. I mentioned some of our student programs. And my favorite part of our portfolio of programs is our programs related to women in politics. Some of these, in fact, many of your students at Southern Miss have participated in Mississippi New Leadership, which is a program for college women across Mississippi. It's a 5-day camp, if you will, in the summer where they get together, hear from speakers, learn about the political process, and it's really a leadership development opportunity for those that are interested in careers in politics. Southern Women in Public Service is something I'll talk about in a little bit. It's a conference that we do for women from 14 southern states to come together, leadership development opportunities, and Ready to Run Mississippi is a campaign training event that we do for women in Mississippi. So why does all this matter? Why do we focus on women in politics? Well, women are definitely underrepresented in the United States and around the world in government leadership. And we've seen, I'll talk about some of the numbers in a minute, that we've had some great growth over the last couple of weeks following the midterm elections, and those numbers are still changing as some of those races are being settled. But we're not where we need to be, certainly. And in the United States, the South as a region lags way behind the rest of the country. Mississippi in particular has great room for improvement regarding women's leadership. So not necessarily just in the legislature or statewide elected officials, but even running state agencies and other departments. But as one of our previous speakers mentioned this morning, women have historically turned out to vote more than men since the 1980s. So women are interested in their future. They're interested in issues that are important to their families and to their communities. They vote, but they're not always running for office, and they're not always getting elected. So just looking at the United States around the world compared to other countries, the United States, these rankings are as of October 1st of this year. The United States ranks 104th on the world rankings of women in government. The top 3 countries, now this is basically percentage of women in their government, in their elected positions. Rwanda, number 1, followed by Cuba, and then Bolivia. That's from the Interparliamentary Union. It's a really neat website if you want to check it out. You can see those rankings and they update them every month, and they talk about how many seats are available, how many seats are filled by women, and a lot of other factors. So other countries ranked higher than the United States: Mexico, Namibia, Spain, Canada, China, Italy, Uganda, the UK, France, and a whole bunch more, obviously. So we as a country have a long way to go. In Congress, so these numbers are as of yesterday morning. Like I said, there are a couple of races that are still not finalized, but in the 116th Congress, that will officially begin January of 2019, but these are the most recent midterm elections, and everyone else, women will hold the most seats in Congress that has ever been held in the history of the United States government. 125 seats of the 535 in the Congress. So that includes both the House of Representatives, there's 435 seats, and 100 in the United States Senate. So you can see the breakdown there of that 125. It's about, obviously, an even split, 23% and 23% in both the House and the Senate. So both chambers did see upticks in their representation of women. But we still have, what I think is a long way to go. The party breakdown of those 125 women, 105 are Democrats, 19 are Republicans, and 1 is an independent. And that's a question that I get a lot by the media. Why is it that most of the women that run for office are Democrats? Does the Republican Party not want women? And I don't know, I always tell them you have to ask them, but I think we are seeing a trend, a very slow trend, in Mississippi, but I think across the country, of the Republican Party starting to really get behind women candidates, identify women candidates, and we can see that in Mississippi, where the governor appointed Cindy Hyde-Smith to replace retired Senator Thad Cochran. We'll get to that in a minute too. Not what y'all are thinking, but her seat. And so again, though, breaking it down even further, women of color. 47 of the 125 women in Congress that will serve in the 116th Congress are women of color, which is the highest percentage that the Congress has ever seen. So steps are being taken, progress is being made, and voter turnout was at an absolute nationwide all-time high in these midterm elections, 4 midterm elections. So people are getting pissed, maybe. People want some change. They want to be part of that change, and women in particular. In Mississippi, and I'm sorry my fonts didn't transfer to this computer, so it's a little wonky, so I apologize. But in Mississippi's delegation in Congress, prior to the appointment of Cindy Hyde-Smith, Mississippi was only one of 2 states in the nation to never send a woman to Congress. Now you can argue that we've never had a woman elected to Congress yet, because she was appointed. But the only other state that can say that is Vermont. Now Mississippi, if you combine that statistic with having never elected a woman to Congress, with the fact that Mississippi has never elected a woman governor, we're the only state in the nation that can say that. So we definitely have work to do. Mississippi has 4 of the 435 members in the House of Representatives, and 2 of the 100 senators. All but 1 currently, and 1 being Cindy Hyde-Smith, all but 1 are male, and always have been since Mississippi became a state in 1817. Both U.S. senators are Republicans. 3 of the 4 representatives are Republicans. So it just kind of shows you where we are in the Congress. Now, as far as our state legislature in Mississippi, only 1 out of the 8 state elected positions are held by women. We did have 2. Cindy Hyde-Smith was a state elected official as the Commissioner of Agriculture, but now that she is in the Congress, or in the Senate rather, we just have one, and that's Lynn Fitch, our treasurer. 9 of the 52 state senators are women, 17%. And 17 of the 122 state representatives are women, only 13%, and that went down quite a bit in recent elections. So 26 of the total 174 seats are held by women, so less than 15%. So how do we compare to other states? We're used to being at the bottom, unfortunately, and that's pretty close to where we fall for this. Mississippi ranks 46 in women elected to the state legislature, which means we are definitely in the bottom 10. Florida, which is now ranked 26th, was ranked 25th last year. They're the only southern state which has a percentage above the national average, which is 25.4%. So the national average of women serving their populations in state government or state legislatures is 25.4%. And so Florida is the only southern state that has a very slight percentage higher than that national average. So the South in general is very, very underrepresented by women. And so why does this matter? You know, I mean, why do we care? Why is it that big of a deal? Well, there are a lot of reasons, and I think probably all of you can come up with a number of reasons why it matters to you. But in general, you know, women make the government more transparent. There are a lot of studies and social studies in particular that contribute to the fact that women play politics far less than their male counterparts, and that they really have a quest for making government more transparent. They bring different priorities to public office because they have different life experiences very often. And they're noticeably absent from policy making on issues for which they are largely affected. So I think, you know, you can certainly identify those, healthcare and education probably being the top ones. I'm sure all of you saw that picture. It kind of went viral last year, but it was a photograph of a boardroom full of white men that was discussing women's health initiatives. And it was cabinet members and national aides and advisors to the president. And so you looked at that and thought, what's going on here? But that's just a visual representation of the status of American politics right now. And so women are definitely absent from that discussion and from those policy deliberations. Two things too, and I've got just quick, let's see, how much time do I have? Well, I don't have a time clock up here. But just some quick little audio clips. But two things in particular that are really important and interesting. One is that women, when you talk about women running for office, they need to be asked to run. Whereas typically, now this is not, I'm not stereotyping all men, but typically men are, I would be a great senator, I would be a great mayor, I'm gonna run for office. Women need to be asked, they need to be asked multiple times. In fact, there was a study that was done by a pollster around the 2016 presidential elections that showed that women need to be asked to run on average of 7 times before they'll actually pull the trigger and run for office. And then women tend to be more bipartisan. I think women are more used to compromise and they want that. So I'm gonna play these clips very briefly. So I'd encourage you to listen if you can.
More than half of the country's voting population, yet they account for less than 20% of those serving in Congress. There are many reasons for that, and as NPR's Tamara Keith dug into it, she found one explanation came up again and again. Women don't necessarily look in the mirror and see a politician. Tamara brings us this story as part of a series on women and politics that we're calling She Votes.
When Monica Youngblood got the call, she thought she was being punked.
Like MTV punked? I was like, what is he talking about?
Youngblood is now a Republican representing Albuquerque in the New Mexico House of Representatives. But when she got that call, she was a mom and a real estate agent who had been volunteering on other people's campaigns for about a decade. The call came from a man she had helped get elected, and he told her,
it's your time. We need people like you in Santa Fe. We need a voice like yours who's lived here, who's been through what you've been through. And I think that you need to really consider it.
When she realized it wasn't a joke, Youngblood had a lot of questions and self-doubt.
Thoughts from, am I qualified to do this? Do we have the time? It will be a sacrifice not only to my profession, but my family, my kids.
It took a few more phone calls and several family conversations to convince Youngblood to run. She did, she won, and this year she's running for re-election unopposed. But this initial reluctance is quite common among female candidates, says Sue Ellspermann, the Lieutenant Governor of Indiana.
You need to be asked. Women are still not likely to just take that step on their own.
Ellspermann speaks from experience. She now works to recruit female candidates to run in down-ballot races as part of the Republican State Leadership Committee's Right Women, Right Now initiative. But 5 years ago, she couldn't imagine herself as a candidate.
When they asked me to consider running, I said, oh no, I haven't run for anything since high school student council. So they said, oh, just think about it.
Ellspermann has a PhD in industrial engineering and owned her own business, and yet she was convinced she wasn't qualified. Brenda Major is a social psychologist at the University of California, Santa Barbara.
I'm not surprised. It makes sense given what we know about women and confidence and self-confidence.
Major's research finds women have less confidence in their own abilities, judge themselves harshly even when they are successful, and carry failures as more of a burden than men do.
So many competent, capable women are basically selecting themselves out of leadership positions. And I think that, we've all wrestled with this. I mean, I know it personally, I know it firsthand.
It's 7:30 in the morning, and about a dozen female members of Congress are bundled against a cold spring rain, practicing softball. They'll play in a charity game later this year.
All right, Donna's running, let's get her!
Maryland Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards plays first base. She was also just named chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee's Red to Blue program, which aims to recruit winning candidates. But Edwards herself was initially a reluctant candidate.
I actually went around to a whole bunch of other people, most of whom held elective office already, and all of them begged out, and it really wasn't until the last moment I got up one morning and I just said, Donna, you've asked everybody, why don't you run?
She confirms most women have to be asked not once, but repeatedly.
We try to get them to yes. The question is always, how do we get them to yes? What is their concern? What's the biggest thing that's on their checklist?
And even then, researchers who look at these things say men are still much more likely to get asked to run. Tamara Keith, NPR News, Washington.
Okay, I'm not gonna play that other one. I know we all just had lunch and we're tired, so I'm gonna move on. But just a quick question, how many of you have ever been asked to run or thought about running for office? I see some like little hands. Yeah, so I think, probably, and I saw some of you nodding, during the audio clip. So I think that holds true. Women don't have the confidence to just say, yeah, I'm running and I'm gonna do this. So that's where groups like yours and that's where communities are so vital to really encouraging women to run because they're qualified and the right women are out there. But there are so many reasons that women don't run, and I think all of us in this room, men and women, can probably relate to these and understand these, gender roles. A lot of times the media will call me and say, well, why does Mississippi not have any women? Why, does Alabama have several women, but they have a woman governor, they have multiple members in Congress that are women, why doesn't Mississippi? And I think they want the answer to be, well, it's the Old South, it's those traditional gender roles. And again, I don't know, you'll have to ask them, but I think there is a little bit of that when we look at politics and specifically party politics. Those gender roles still exist where, the women are supposed to stay home and take care of the kids and cook and clean and all those things. Gender stereotypes, like I mentioned. Gendered institutions. There are a lot of articles out there about this. Incumbency, it's really hard for a woman to unseat a male incumbent. We saw a lot of that happening though in the midterm elections, so I think the tide is turning a little bit. But traditionally, that's been a big issue. And then gender biases. I think I had another one in here, but it went away. But work-life balance, you know. There actually have been a couple of states that have changed their campaign finance rules so that women, or really anyone, but women primarily, can use campaign funds for childcare. You know, when you're on the campaign trail and it's 24/7, you know, your husband or your spouse or your partner or your family is there to support you and help with the kids. But I know my kids, they want to be with mama a lot of times. And so being able to use campaign funds to have a sitter on the campaign trail and have your kids right there with you is something that we're seeing a lot more of. And so what do you need to know? You know, what is important about this? What are some takeaways? Women have made great strides in politics. So specifically, like we discussed after the midterm elections, wow. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the returns that Tuesday night, but it was just woman after woman. Now, we did have over 200 women run for office, but you know, what, 114 were successful. So not quite 50%, but very close to it. So really great improvement in terms of success rates. So we've made great strides. However, most levels of government, women still constitute less than a fourth of all office holders. And so there's a lot of work to do. We need women leaders because women bring different perspectives. And there are many opportunities, and I put your generation because I knew that a lot of students would be here, but for all of us, but in particular for young women, there are many opportunities out there, but getting in the industry early, you know, understanding politics, it's, I don't want to say a game, but there's a method to it. Politics is really strategic. It's not just about believing in an issue. And I think that's where women have not been as successful in the past, is that women run on issues. They run because they're really unhappy about the status quo of education or healthcare or the economy or whatever it may be, whereas men typically run to advance their career, or they think that they're right for that time and they're good leaders. But women run on issues. However, typically issues don't win campaigns. And so understanding the strategic nature of elections is really important, and that's where young people can get involved really early and take advantage of some of those opportunities. A couple that I'll just briefly mention, a little shameless plug, but we have the Stennis Center's Southern Women in Public Service Conference, a leadership development conference. Again, women from 14 southern states coming together at this gorgeous location in Asheville, North Carolina for about 2 days. It's a really moving, powerful experience to be a part of. So we're going back to Asheville this year, and then it'll be every other year from then on. So you can learn a little bit more about that at southernwomeninpublicservice.com. Also, we have just created, and I want to invite all of you, so if you've kind of dozed off, wake up now. We've got a closed Facebook group. Sorry guys, but this is just for the ladies. We have a closed Facebook group. When you go into your Facebook page, you can just search Southern Women in Public Service. And the closed group that comes up, you can request to join. You have to answer a couple of questions. Basically, you have to confirm that you're willing to engage in a bipartisan space and that you're not going to campaign for other people in that space. But we have really invested a lot of time in creating that space for women that are interested in public service. Whether you are thinking about running, you just want to be more involved in the political process, you're just kind of interested in public service, or you want to work on a campaign, whatever it may be, you're invited. And so we have some really awesome resources that you can download, digital campaign guides. We're about to start a book club, like an online book club from a previous ambassador to a former U.S. ambassador that authored a book. 5 minutes, okay, thank you. That's going to be on there with some live video chat. So anyways, it's a really cool space that I would love to invite you to be a part of. And that is beyond the conference. So the Stennis Center is really making an investment in trying to create those spaces for relationship building, for learning and growth outside of policy. So I hope that you will join us there. Again, southernwomeninpublicservice.com, and you can read about the conference and all of our initiatives for that. And there are so many other things that we do at the Stennis Center that I definitely didn't have a chance to talk about. So please engage with us on social media and on our website, but definitely consider joining that Facebook group if you're interested. I think we have about 3 or 4 minutes. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to take those. I know you guys have had a long day. You might just be ready to move on. Yes?
Are there other offices like yours in other states?
That is a great question, and no, there aren't. In fact, we're a really unique agency, but we do have a national profile. And so if there are, in fact, I've got a meeting, even though it's just right next door, in Alabama on Monday about some of these initiatives. We do work all over the country, Congress to campus in particular, from Rhode Island to California and everywhere in between. So we're really interested in growing our portfolio into other states. But we are pretty heavy in DC and Mississippi because that's where our offices are. Yes, ma'am.
Do you find that women, I just know this must be true, that women worry more about maybe they're not pretty enough or put together enough more than men do? I would think that's an obvious yes, but.
Yes, definitely. And in fact, I went to a conference all about polling data after the presidential election, which was so fascinating. But just a quick kind of polling evidence from that. When a man and a woman are running against each other in a race, if a woman's appearance is mentioned in the media at all, like, oh, Jen's red dress is gorgeous, or Jen's red dress is hideous, whether it's, positive or negative, regardless, she's lost weight, or she's chubby, whatever. If a woman's appearance is mentioned at all, she automatically suffers in the polls. She pays a price for that in her favorability. Because if she's pretty, she's promiscuous. If if she's wearing pants, why is she not wearing a dress? And when men's appearance is mentioned, they always, literally in every case that this pollster took into account, they don't pay a price in the polls. It has absolutely no bearing on their favorability. So yeah, so women do, I think about that a lot, and it's something that is really difficult to overcome. And so what we try to do with some of our trainings is, rather than saying, you're never gonna have to deal with that, just come on, run. We provide training for, yes, that's gonna happen, here's how you can respond to it. Here's the best way to react when a troll comes at you on your Facebook page, various things like that. Because it is not an even level playing field. It's just not. So that's a great question. I have time for one more question. Anybody has one? Okay, well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed being with y'all, and